Hello and welcome to the Collapse Experiment. This video is regarding Barry Seal. Now, how does Barry Seal get tied into Jeffrey Epstein? I'm hoping to find out. So this is from Volume 1 of One Nation Under Blackmail by Whitney Webb. I have a few other books that have Barry Seal mentioned in it. But Barry Seal, a very, very interesting guy. Although fictionalized account, American Made is a great movie if you want to be introduced into the lore of Barry Seal. Although it does skip the whole 11/22/63. The day that JFK... So there was one plane after that event that was allowed to leave the Dallas airport, although all flights were grounded from the Dallas airport. But there's one that was allowed for some reason, and it was piloted by Barry Seal. And he had 5 or 6 undocumented, not listed passengers on this plane. So that's a little bit, a quick background on Barry Seal, but we're going to learn a little bit more right now. I'd also like to point out that Barry Seal and, God, it's not John Wilkes Booth. God, Lee Harvey Oswald. So Barry Seal and Lee Harvey Oswald were both in the same civilian Air Corps together prior to JFK's. Weird how all these people are tied together. So this is page 340. I'm starting kind of at the beginning of a chapter here called Clinton Contra, but I wanted to jump right to Barry. Udall was not alone in acquiring the C-123K from Doyne. It had previously fallen into the hands of one Adler Berryman, Barry Seal, the commercial pilot turned drug smuggler and CIA asset. Seal had picked up the plane, used it for drug smuggling flights, then returned it to Doyne Helicopters in July 1985. Seal, importantly, was connected to the same criminal figures that had been woven into the covert Contra support network. Beginning in 1981, Seal had begun to ferry cocaine on behalf of Jorge Ochoa, one of the Medellin cartel founding members. In a few years, Seal's Medellin smuggling had expanded considerably, with police attention mounting at his home state of Louisiana. Seal set up a new base of operations in rural Arkansas. The location that Seal selected was an Intermountain Municipal Airport in Mena, Arkansas, near the Arkansas-Oklahoma border. Mena was a small, unassuming town, yet throughout the 80s, the area encircled the airport became a hotbed of intrigue. I bet it was. In 1989, journalist John Cummings, in one of the first articles written on Seal in Mena, wrote that Seal had virtually taken over a local airport repair and modification operation at the airport, and the good citizens of Mena began to notice some strange going-ons, landings at night, tight security around Seal's plane, a hangar converted into a virtual fortress. There were also sightings of what appeared to be airdrops, the construction of airstrips deep in the woods beyond the airport, and even darker rumors that whatever was happening was sanctioned by the CIA. The report of the Kerry Commission on Narcotics later stated that Associates of SEAL were targets of grand jury probes into narcotics trafficking. Yet these cases were dropped despite the strong protests of state and federal law enforcement officials. The apparent reasons, the report continues, was that the prosecution might have revealed national security information. Now, what was the reason for not releasing the Epstein files? Was it national security information? Jack Anderson, and again, we know this was happening. The CIA was running drugs into the United States. They're probably the biggest organized drug smuggling operation in the country. It was not the Mexican cartels. And if it was the cartels were probably working for, take a guess. Jack Anderson wrote in the Washington Post that SEAL died in 1986. IRS investigators descended upon Mena and seized records and other documents from the smugglers' offices there. The IRS was keeping its report under wraps, but Anderson played its game. Contra-Mena connection. The absence of a public release of this report allowed a comprehensive firewall to be set in place, permitting investigators to quietly detail the story of SEAL and that of Iran-Contra. That the plane shot down in Nicaragua had been used by SEAL was written off as a mere coincidence, with the intermediary figure Harry Doyne acting as a convenient buffer. Unfortunately for the proponents of this narrative, the specter of SEAL appears throughout the official documentation of the Iran-Contra case. A May 1983 U.S. Customs report noted that an aircraft piloted by Frank Moss and owned by his Hondu Carib Aviation Company was involved in drug smuggling linked to Barry Seal. As previously mentioned, Moss and his aviation companies were entangled not only with the enterprise's Contra support efforts, but with repeat allegations of drug trafficking. These allegations rang true in the case of this plane, tail number N90201, which made at least one airdrop of large quantities of marijuana and cocaine at an isolated farm near Baton Rouge, Louisiana. The farm's address, yada, yada, yada. Given Moss ties to ADA drug trafficking operations, it seems likely that Seal himself was part of these wider smuggling networks. It would also align Seal with the Cali cartel in addition to his earlier Medellin ties, which paints a complicated picture of the unstable alliances and power competitions that rage between the surface of this covert world. Journalist David Hopsicker, in his biography of Barry Seal, writes that he obtained documents from the trafficker's widow which showed that in 1986, Seal was doing business with Summit Aviation. I'd also like to point out that Daniel Hopsicker, I heard him in another podcast maybe 2 years ago, 2 or 3 years ago. And he was talking about banging the widow. He lived with her for a period of time. And he was like, I'm a very fortunate man, is kind of how he put it. As mentioned in the previous chapter, Summit was controlled by the DuPont family. All of the Foxcatcher. Watch Foxcatcher. Summit was controlled by the DuPont family and was managed by Patrick Foley, a veteran of the CIA and Flying Tiger Line. It was Summit that had provided a small aircraft that was utilized for bombing run in Nicaragua, while it was Foley who had recommended the drug smuggling pilot to the State Department for the transportation of humanitarian supplies to the Contras. Foley, Hopsicker writes, was a SEAL associate whose name and number are in Barry's files. Good Lord. Okay, so I am cutting ahead a little bit. This is page 344, but we're back to Barry. Barry Seal's life was ultimately cut short by a hail of gunfire in Baton Rouge on February 19th, 1986. The official story is that the smuggler had been taken out by hitmen dispatched by the Medellin cartel, who had placed a bounty on Seal when it became known that he was involved with the DEA. It's possible, however, that there were other actors in play. As Daniel Hopsicker reported, rumors have abounded that the source of the hit was really the CIA, or Oliver North, or even George Herbert Walker Bush. It is alleged, for instance, that Seal had considerable evidence of the vice president's sons, George W. and Jeb, receiving a large amount of cocaine. Bob Thomason, what the hell kind of name is this? A Louisiana State police officer told Hopsicker that the FBI had taken charge of the crime scene and removed boxes from the trunk of Seal's car. Boxes that contained very compelling documents and tapes. There is also the question of the weapon used in the hit. It had been sourced from Jose Cooten, an owner of a gun store and fashion boutique in Miami. Cooten had been one of the many CIA-trained Cuban exiles, having served in Brigade 2506, though it is unknown if he participated in the Bay of Pigs. In the 80s, he was deeply involved in Contra support activities and had been flipped into acting as an FBI informant. Though the information he provided to the Bureau, we know that he was acquainted with a number of key players. This included the principals of Figueroas, the Colombian cartel front company contracted by the State Department, the CIA, and cartel-linked rancher in Costa Rica, John Hull. Tom Posey of Civilian Material Assistance, the military special forces group tied to the enterprise, and to John K. Siglum and Jack Terrell, an early Iran-Contra whistleblower. Seal's untimely death didn't put an end to the ongoings in Mena. However, Russell Welch, a state police investigator who had been monitoring Seal, noted that in 1987, there was a spate of new activity in the Mena airport with the appearance of an Australian business, and C-130s had appeared. C-130s, military cargo plane. Now, that leads into a few other things. I know that it's well documented of self-deletions on military bases, especially ones that had runways and airports. And C-130s that were not on the list for being flown in with unknown cargo. And guys would go and check these planes, and, our 18-year-old son had no signs of depression until he joined the military. Up until that night. I'll just leave it at that. There was a lot of guys that happened with. So, that is a little bit about Barry Seal. I'll probably cover him more later. Now, there was nothing about Epstein in there. However, it is well known that through Khashoggi, he was helping transfer the money with the drug running and the Mujahideen and the Contras. And yeah, he even stated himself he worked for the CIA. So there you have it. Another installment of the Epstein playlist. If you enjoyed this video, check out the rest of the playlist. here on this channel.